Welcome to Politically Connected, a podcast on everything politics and governance in Africa. Here we unpack the complexities of people, policy, and power. I'm your host, Diana Ngao,
aka Madam Speaker, and I am Chaka.
aka the Bishop.
Praise God.
Amen, amen, amen. In this episode, we're going to go broader than the Kenyan borders, and we're going to discuss the Africa Union Chairmanship bid, where we have our very own son of the soil, Mr. Raila Amolo Odinga, who has been fronted by our government to run for the chairmanship of the Africa Union. I mean, the Odinga's name has been so synonymous in our political history, I think since I can remember. Yeah. So it's going to be an interesting history. It's going to be an interesting episode. It's going to be an interesting episode. For all those people who started with us from episode 1, asante sana. Thank you for subscribing. Thank you for sharing this video. Thank you for just being part of this journey. And now we are here. Hakuna kurudi nyuma, Chaka. Yeah. Hakuna reverse gear. Tuko hapa episode 5. Thank you so much for being part of the politically connected community. And for those joining us for the first time, usijali, hatujaenda mbele sana. You can catch up. But karibu to this episode. Chaka.
Where do we begin?
I know, that's what I'm wondering.
It's such an interesting... There's so much to unpack.
Yeah.
He's being presented as having been fronted by the government of Kenya.
Yeah.
Which technically is part of the process that your government puts your name forward. But is it Kenya that is fronting him? Anyway, let's pack that there first.
Hey, Chaka leo ameanza na speed.
Tumesoma hakuna reverse gear, imevunjika.
Hakuna reverse gear.
So you can't slow down.
Yeah, I think like if you ask me, is it Kenya? It is the Kenyan president fronting him. Is it Kenyans? I mean, Raila has been such a huge political figure in our politics. Like, I mean, for majority of us who are alive today, are synonymous with the Odinga name and the role that they have played in our politics in one juncture or another. So for him now going to serve Africa as the chairman, it leaves such a huge void. I don't know if we are ready for that.
It's a good point you make, because he's actually been at the center of Kenyan politics for the last 30 years.
Yeah.
You know, at least at the helm. Longer if you include the years when his father was still at the helm.
I was about to say, Odinga has been, the Odinga name has been there since the birth of the nation.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah.
And specifically for Raila, he's ever since the doyen of Kenyan politics, Jaramogi, passed on, he's been front and center.
Yeah.
And essentially a part of every government since.
Ever say that again?
He's been a part of every government since.
But has he been president?
He's been prime minister. They've only been 2 prime ministers, by the way.
Yeah?
Yeah, so he's been prime minister.
Who's the other prime minister?
Jomo Kenyatta was initially prime minister before he was president.
Yes, before he was president.
So Kenya has only had 2 prime ministers.
The father of the nation and the father of democracy.
Of modern democracy.
Of modern democracy in Kenya.
Last time you wanted to say is the father of another word that starts with M.
Yeah, maandamano.
So it's very
don't
interesting.
Quote me, guys. Don't quote me.
It's very interesting. You hit a trend. It's very interesting because we discussed this in the last episode. I think alikuwa na handshake na Moi. Your time jogoo ya KANU ilimeza Tinga.
Yeah.
He was there Grand Coalition. He was there again with the infamous handshake. And right now...
But that was in the second term of the Jubilee administration, is where we had the handshake. I think between the first term, 2013 to 2017, they were not having any Raila in their government.
But that has been the trend, because if you look at post Section 2A multi-party era
1991.
Politics, from the 1992 period to 97, he's not there. But it's in the second term of Moi under the multi-party era that he comes into play again with Kibaki. He's not there in the first term. But in the second term, Grand Coalition government. So,
it's a playbook.
It's a playbook.
He has actually created a playbook, by the way.
So this where he has key ministries. Is actually a deviation from that playbook, which means in many ways we are in unprecedented times.
What do you mean a deviation from that playbook?
Because this is WSR's first term.
Okay. Because usually it happens in the second term.
The second term.
But the temperatures were too hot. WSR could not sail through without Raila. Or rather, in my opinion, let me add that, in my opinion.
So if he couldn't sail through without Raila, what does it mean as Raila exits the local scene of our politics? Not just for this regime, considering how he has been front and center for 30 years. What does it mean now he's going to the continental shelf of Africa? It's unprecedented in many ways.
It really is, because I'm trying to see ODM without Raila. Because ODM, it's just sons of Baba, daughters of Raila Odinga. I know, and yesterday we also saw ODM Central Committee give Governor Nyang' Nyong'o acting capacity as the party leader of ODM. Which is a great decision. And Nyang' Nyong'o is a brilliant mind and has also served this country so greatly.
He will be a stabilizing force. He's actually played it quite well. And you can actually see a bit of the Kanu era politics because what he did effectively is now there are 3 deputy party leader posts.
Representing key regions.
Yes, and that's exactly what Moi did towards the end when he had quite a number of deputy party leaders. You had the likes of Katana Ngala. You had quite a number of them. In fact,
was Sharif Nasir deputy party leader then? No.
I don't
or
think
more
so.
Or like just a coastal.
Because Katana Ngala was also from coast. So, but if I'm not wrong, you had deputy party leaders from all the former provinces.
Wow.
So you can see
Moi
this.
Is a chef. He was just cooking.
And this was before the Akama time. So seeing how Raila has also moved to stabilize ODM actually shows that one, he's thinking of it as a national party, not a regional party. Because he's cut across the country. Coast to coast, Kisumu to Mombasa. So, and then it's interesting how Gladys Wanga
is rising to the chairmanship.
In keeping with the
chairpersonship. Yes, not chairman. The chairwoman.
Imagine it, they still call it chairman technically.
It should be chairwoman.
It should be.
But chair lady.
Even these parastatal boards of ours, when a lady is appointed, she's still chairman.
No. It should be chair lady.
It should be, but it shouldn't. Do we do a petition?
We do a petition. We petition.
So this dynamics already, I think the transition we're seeing is actually in keeping with something thematic that's happening in the country, we are generally in a period of transition.
I was about to say,
Yes.
is this Raila handing over the baton?
Whether he's handing it over or he's smoothening the inevitable, because it's a generational transfer of power.
Yeah.
So we've seen with the protests, the Gen Z,
Yeah.
and the people in leadership now are the Gen Xers, who may not have a long period.
Because the millennials and the Gen Zs are hot on their heels.
Yes,
Yeah.
so they will enjoy. Actually, sorry to use this example, but it's a kind of Prince Charles moment.
Oh, wait. Prince Charles waited how long to be king?
Exactly. And then now that he is, I don't think he's going to be there for too long. And that's exactly what is going to happen with Gen Xers.
I feel bad for them.
Yeah, that's exactly what's going to happen here as well. So even as he leaves, it's not just a Raila factor.
Yeah.
It makes it very interesting that one such a dominant figure is exiting the local scene, but at home there's this existential crisis.
Yeah. That keeps replaying. Like just when you think,
where are we going?
Yeah, just when you think there's quiet, something else rears its head. Yeah, I'm just trying to. Maybe it's because we have seen Raila in the scene for as long as we can remember that we can't imagine him out of the scene and out of like going off to serve the 54 states of Africa. Is it 54 or 55 now?
55. There are 55 member states.
Yeah.
And I would suggest actually. Those who have a head start are those who can imagine our political scene without him. Because those who can't imagine it are in that norm, in that culture.
Yeah. And I think then what you're basically saying is that the Gen Zs have a head start.
Yes.
Because, I mean, they are leaderless, they are partyless, they are tribeless.
Yes.
And a good section of the politics that has been and I'm not trying to paint that it is Raila who has created this culture, but he has been a political figure in this political culture that now the Gen Zs are saying, Hapana. So they do actually have a head start.
And so, in fact, on that note, I'd like to paint 3 scenarios pegged on what you've mentioned about our imagination with respect to Baba and our local politics. So there are those who are seeing it as very binary in terms of Baba in local politics and Baba out on continental politics, difficult as it is to imagine. And the 2 scenarios that come from that binary version is what it means if he wins and what it might mean if he doesn't, which again, the imagination is being stretched. It's a discussion that's not being had. What does it mean if he doesn't
win?
Yes.
By the way, what does that mean?
Now, there's also a third scenario. For those who can imagine our politics without him, regardless, either way, there would be an emergence of a third force. So it's in terms of situation analysis where
in unprecedented times.
Yes, the permutations are
endless.
Yeah.
Endless.
Seemingly endless, yeah.
Wow.
Could play out in many very different ways. And so I think coming back to the point about that transition and what he's doing at ODM shows I think it may reflect his political awareness, which is why he's establishing structures to stabilize
the party.
Given you can see he's played it very well in terms of giving credence to loyalists, but who are still competent. Because if you look at the people he selected to go into cabinet, and of course, we don't believe that they were approached.
I heard the word you used. I'm like, selected. Well, yes. What they say is that they were approached in their individual capacities.
There are
you had to believe
50 million Kenyans who shall not be carried pumpkin.
Hiyo ni story ya jaba. Straight jaba juice.
Yeah. So the ones he selected, if you look at it, were the two deputy party leaders,
yes,
the chairman of ODM, John Badi, and
the minority leader in parliament.
So those are the most high-ranking officials directly below him. Mm-hmm. And so as they move into cabinet, he then creates a stabilizing force by creating a new position for deputy party leader
to make them three.
So he puts Abdul Swamad, governor
of Mombasa.
Mm-hmm. He puts
Simba
Arati, governor of Kisii, and he puts Osotsi as well. And then in the chairmanship, you have Gladys Wanga, which also speaks to the sensibilities of our politics, because we're seeing more women leaders emerging.
Yeah.
And maybe as it's also politically genius, because which of these men will stand up to fight Gladys Wanga? I bet you if it was another man who had been put in that position,
ingekuwa siasa. Siasa noma. Labda hata sasa kuna siasa.
Yeah, but he silenced them, and she's competent. She's doing an excellent job in Homa Bay, and she can't be bullied. So you can see he's also, if I'm not wrong, he's set up, I think, an elders committee who will help oversee the party. Yeah. And then now the Governor Nyong'o decision.
Yeah. I honestly think it is a brilliant decision to put Anyang' Nyong'o. It shows that he does really want ODM to outlive him. It needs to continue as, in the last episode we spoke when ODM actually began as the Orange Democratic Movement. And ODM is treated as one of the largest parties in Africa. Yeah.
The question now, let me throw a spanner in the works. So somebody like Anyang' Nyong'o has been there since, he's part of that class of politics
from the
90s. Question is, where is senior Governor James Orengo?
Mimi sijui na hata sitaki kuuliza.
We cannot kill our people. And the time when we are mourning them, we are looking for officers. That cannot happen. We must first deal with injustice.
I think it's interesting because, again, he's been a loyalist for a long time.
Yeah. ODM is a very, very interesting political party. Sometimes I even term it as an animal because it eats its own. Right? Yes, Orengo has been at the forefront and such a loyal supporter of Baba, but perhaps he's also just like, I'm governor, I'm good. Because I remember when it was leading up, or where people were talking about this broad-based government, who's going to be in it, blah, blah, blah. Governor Orengo on Twitter and also in public functions was very critical.
Exactly.
He was very critical and saying, you cannot be like the hyenas. Exactly. Even hyenas are not this greedy.
And I think that's what it is. And also in the past, you've seen Governor James Orengo sometimes charting his own path, because remember, he has run for president as well at a time when Raila was also running. There was a time when he was running for senator. There was that controversy of him being asked to step down for Oburu Odinga. And initially he was about to, and then he came back and said,
nah.
So maybe that could be a factor, especially since we're talking about, stabilizing the politics as we transition.
Yeah.
So, but that's ODM. Now
we are at.
What then happens? So you can see he's thinking ahead, but what then happens when? Because now people are acclimatizing to this idea that he's going into continental politics. He's going to represent country at the AU. What if he doesn't win? And now he's back on the scene and all these people had gotten comfortable. Does he quietly, sit back?
I think the question, even before I get to your question, the question that rings in my mind is that, was this really an Odinga ambition? Was it really his ambition? Because we're just shy of the last general election where he was running for presidency. Was this really like his ambition, or was this a negotiated
settlement,
that sikupati nusu mkate, but we can support you to get elsewhere. And I feel like it's also a political maneuver, because imagine a political scene without Raila Odinga. It completely changes the front-running race for presidency. So someone somewhere is doing some calculations and or rather, even before calculation, is cooking. Someone is cooking, has cooked.
Let him cook.
And we've seen the first course, we've seen broad-based government.
Then, you said Broadway's government.
Broadway's government. Nusumkate. Then we're now seeing the AU chairmanship bid. Yeah. We probably see a new constellation. Kenya Kwanza will kwisha. And it will become something else. Someone is cooking. That's how I see it. I'm like, I don't know whether this was I'm struggling to believe that this was a Raila Odinga ambition, and it was more like it was placed on him that, listen, stop destabilizing me, shika hii kitu, nitakufund.
Or maybe it even came from somewhere else altogether. Because, when do we start talking? Now it's part of our daily conversation in a sense. But at what point does it become a thing? When does this discussion about Raila running for the AU start emerging?
At NADCO.
Did it? Was it discussed at NADCO?
It wasn't discussed. That's why I'm saying, some of these things are not discussed in the public limelight, even though they are of public interest. Some of these things they just appear. It's like what do you call these things that farmers? It's like a weed. It just shoop. Or I'm here.
In the spirit of saying that someone is cooking, it was planted
in someone's head.
Not just in it was planted in our media. So that it starts as a rumor, or there are talks of maybe he might run, or let's reach out for comment. Can you confirm or not confirm? Because it just starts bubbling. And some people have theorized that it actually started with Baba Olusegun. No, but there's Baba and there's Baba. When he came to Kenya, and there were 3 men in a room. Baba, Baba, and...
Your favorite politician.
Our favorite politician.
Not ours, yours.
And it's the 3 of them in a room. We never got to know what it is that they discussed and agreed or disagreed.
Hiyo ndio ilikuwa settlement. In my opinion, a room where we don't really know what has been agreed, and then a few months down the line, you hear rumors, media is now whispering some things. It all seems to me, I'm sorry, because I just can't get over the loss of 2022. I feel like it was an election that Baba could have easily won. And I could see, as someone who was part of the campaign, I could see his enthusiasm even grow towards the end. Like, I remember there's a time we were Eldoret, a really big, it was a Sunday rally, really big rally in Eldoret, and Jeshi La Baba started playing, and you see Raila jumping. I was like, wow. You know, it had, and this was really late into the campaign.
Yes.
So I could see like, this is someone who really wants it. You're not sleeping. You're trying to do as many engagements with the people,
Tirelessly,
you know, just to deliver this home. But anyway, nonetheless, here we are, and he is now Kenya's candidate for the Africa Union chairman.
So speaking of losses, why would we be so pessimistic to think of Raila losing the AU race? Is it just a random sense of pessimism, or is it an objective analysis?
I don't think it's random. There are people who, let me tell you, there are two sides. There are people who actually have analyzed and seen that the Djibouti candidate is actually a strong contender. But there's also people who feel like Baba sold them out by having Broadway's government, his top lieutenants entering the executive after the Gen Z protest. And there are some of them who actually wish that, no, because of that action, we do not want you, you're not Kenya's candidate, you're someone else's candidate. So there's half, but if I would mostly want to focus about the actual continental politics in terms of the Djibouti candidate. It seems in history, the AU chairmanship has been held mostly by West Africa or Francophone speaking countries. And Djibouti, it's not in West, it's Iko Isaidie yetu.
Yes.
Iko Isaidie yetu, but then it is a French speaking country. And the person who I am unable to pronounce his name. Do you know his name?
Mohamed Yusuf.
Oh, Yusuf.
Yeah,
Mohamed Yusuf. Where he seems to be a strong contender and who's backed by also foreign powers.
And on that point of foreign powers, it feels like something, a chapter out of the book Games People Play. Because on the one hand, like you've said, there may be countries that are not keen to support Baba because they feel that he's not actually Kenya's candidate, he's somebody else's candidate. But on the other hand, there's a seeming sense that the Djibouti candidate may also be getting support from the West because of the military bases which are there. So,
and also the Middle East as well. Like he has strong ties in Middle East, so he makes a strong. Kenya, but we do have military. Where the tongue is tonguing, the military bases here.
They were not anymore. There's presence. There's some military presence, but we really pushed against it. So Djibouti has quite a number of military installations compared to any presence that Kenya has. And one of the things about the Djibouti candidate is he has advantages, yes, in terms of being French-speaking, so he appeals to the Francophone countries. Of course, he's Anglophone as well, he can speak English. And he also has a grip of North Africa or it is assumed that he does, because of the endorsement by the OIC, which basically essentially Organization of Islamic
African States.
So and the Secretary General of that organization came out to say that they've agreed to support him, but at the same time we see Algeria supporting Baba. So that's what I'm saying. It's a chapter out of Games People Play. So, and even here in East Africa, there's an assumption that all Eastern African nations will supporting him, but the taste of the pudding will be in the eating. And so what happens is that
Niko na swali.
Yes.
Did we see Paul Kagame in Baba's AU chairmanship bid launch? Was he there?
So, Eastern African countries.
Moving on swiftly.
Ever since I read a book by a lady called Michaela Wrong, who wrote John Githongo's It's Our Turn to Eat. She recently wrote a book called Do Not Disturb. So there are some names I do not utter.
You put on D&D.
Yes. So moving on swiftly.
Yes, moving on swiftly.
Eastern African nations, we assume that they'll all support him. And there's a sense in which Southern African nations will also support him. And part of that assumption comes from, well, the East African community, for one, and regional interests, which is usually a big factor in terms of the negotiations. But in terms of the rotational leadership, though it's not actually a rule, the sense is that the leadership should rotate. And now it's the turn of an Eastern African country to lead. And Djibouti is Eastern African, Kenyan is Eastern African.
Yeah.
So it's interesting that the support for the Djibouti candidate is coming from the other side of the continent.
Yeah.
Interestingly. And, from the Upper Cape of the continent. And with Papa now, we assume he has the support of about 19 or 20 countries, which has him at about 36%.
What do you need to win the chairmanship?
2/3.
2/3 or 36 member states voting in your favor?
Yes.
Okay.
In the first round.
In the first round, yeah.
Right now, there are 4 candidates. So it's doubtful. The last 2 AU elections, no one won in the first round.
Yeah.
In fact, the last one, which Kenya also presented a candidate, Amina Mohammed, went to 7 rounds.
Really?
Yes. So it would be very surprising if he won it in the first round. It would be very interesting and exciting, actually, because that would be a huge endorsement.
Unprecedented.
Yeah, and then, so if in the subsequent rounds, the person with the least votes keeps falling off until you're
left with one or two.
One or two, but even then.
Yeah, if you're left with one candidate, they still have to vote. It's not an automatic win.
And you still need the 2/3 support.
Wow.
Yeah.
He's climbing a really steep mountain.
Yeah, and the thing is, why it's a bit difficult to discern is because there are times where, in the past in the AUC, the candidate that seemed to be leading initially ended up losing because of shifting allegiances. Why? Regional interests.
Let me ask, because one of the core agendas or objectives of AU is to defend the sovereignty and the territories of the African member states. Why is it that by Djibouti having military bases of foreign countries make them a strong contender? Like, I'm wondering whether the Africa Union, just like some of our African states, and we need to be very honest here, some of our African states are influenced by international powers. Very many. There's no need to name any of them.
Actually, the question is there any that isn't?
Yeah, so, and then now we have this AU, which is meant to be our... let me not call it UN, but the EU of Africa, our uniting organization. I mean, when it was founded, that was it. It was to unite, to be able to defend.
It was the Pan-African dream.
Exactly. But is it really, have we... I mean, I'm just thinking about the influence of foreign powers in now this race for chairmanship, and how are we playing into their tunes? Are we just puppet masters, and are they puppet masters, and we are the puppets just dancing to their tunes? I'm just wondering, because
I would say
it would be
that
tragic.
I wouldn't look at it again in absolute terms, but it's a huge factor. The reason I hesitate is because you have seen the African Union take some positions that are anti the Western establishment, which is encouraging.
Yeah.
But there is a high level of infiltration, and that's just part of statecraft.
Yeah.
And just to give an example, you see the fact that, for example, the US is not a signatory to the Rome Statute, and yet it has a huge say in, for instance, matters ICC. It's such a key player. So it shouldn't surprise us
wild.
that...
It is absolutely wild.
And I would say at this point, allow me to even be a bit poetic, our Pan-African founding fathers were also prophets, because the likes of Julius Nyerere and Kwame Nkrumah, in a Martin Luther King kind of sense of, I have seen,
I have a dream.
and I've seen that promised land. Our Pan-African founding fathers gave us a warning that there was this thing that was coming that we need to be wary of. Just because we had gained independence,
it was not over.
It was not over. And the thing that was coming, this animal, was called neo-colonialism.
Did you know that actually Raila's father, Jaramogi Odinga, was in the initial first summit of the OAU, which subsequently became the AU. And in his opening statement, he's like, Africa can never be free until all African states are free. And it's synonymous still today, because yes, we may have gained independence, we have all these head of states, but are we really free?
He reminded me of the book that he authored, Not Yet Uhuru. Exactly. So yeah, it's a key question: are we really free? And so I think it's a balance. Yes, they may infiltrate, but it doesn't necessarily mean that
their candidate will win,
or that the policies of the candidates they're supporting works against us.
Oh, okay.
But it does still, entrench the infiltration, yes. So it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out, because there's also a global game that is going on.
Yes.
And Africa, which like during the Cold War was a battleground for what they called Star Wars, battle by proxy.
Yeah.
And you had even communist countries communist-leaning countries in Africa at that time, and the Western-influenced ones. So now we're seeing this battle between the BRICS countries, who are pushing for de-dollarization, who have such a strong presence on the continent, and the West, which has at times, sometimes ignored the continent and sometimes just had an extractive policy towards Africa, what they get out of it.
Definitely.
And, but the Eastern powers have taken more of a collaborative approach.
Yeah.
And you saw that even back in the 80s and 90s. So now there's this situation you see that the Northern African countries are aligned to Middle East, and in fact North Africa is often sometimes in political analysis bunched together as Middle East. Now in sub-Saharan Africa, you've seen the prevalence of Russia in West African states, even supporting the wave of the coups that we saw there. You've seen South Africa taking a strong stand
against the West.
And it's one of the name partners of the BRICS nation. So what was left really, and of course Congo, the Central Africa has
Really devastating conditions.
It is really the epitome of the extractive policies of the West. Because
scramble for Africa.
Scramble, it's still going on. Scramble and petition. So you see this situation where somehow the West was getting cornered out of the continent. And so there is then this push to reestablish their dominance. I remember when Obama was still president, and China had really come strong into Africa. Is when you see Obama that time as president had not yet come to Kenya, but he came to Tanzania
and bypassed Kenya. I remember
whether in the cover of night alipitia Masai Mara kusalimia Auma karudi, we don't know. But he comes to Tanzania and flies back. And what they were pushing at that time was lighting up Africa. It was an electricity agenda. And that was part of their counter to
what the East was doing.
And
at that time, Kibaki was president. And Kibaki really was anti-foreign power funds.
Yes.
He was not borrowing from the World Bank. He was not borrowing from IMF. He was like, whatever we're doing will be completely developed by our own capital. Whether it's private investment or public, it was going to be
own source revenue. Yeah, he did open the door a little bit for some of it. And that's actually, it said that he's the one who opened the door for China, but then Uhuru came and flung it open.
He left a little sleep where the wind can blow. Then Uhuru was like,
So, because now you see a lot of that infrastructure development, and part of the argument was that with China's collaborative approach, they had less conditions and infrastructure was able to move faster. Remember Uhuru talking about closing the infrastructure gap or infrastructure deficit, and that we were behind and we needed to catch up to compete with the rest of the world. So you see this global games also being at play in this race for AUC. They want a say in who's going to be running the show. They want to be able to bend that person's ear. So you also wonder, much as we're talking about Western powers, how are the Eastern powers influencing their local partners on the continent in terms of how they should swing? It's an interesting question.
That's true. That's true.
Even these endorsements that we're seeing, for example, when we say Baba has 19 or 20 countries, they may hold for the first round because the countries will know that nobody will win in the first round. They might surprise us, but in the subsequent rounds where it becomes even an issue of now regional interests. And you see part of the conversation in the country has been that it's Raila running for AUC. And I think that has been a strategic mistake because it should have been Kenya
is running for AUC.
And that works out strategically better if Baba loses, because it's Kenya that has lost, so we have lost. But now it's
Raila. But Raila has really played a very big role in Africa Union before. When he was was it in NEPAD?
No, even in AU, he was a high representative for
infrastructure in Africa.
And that time it was perceived that it was also because of the handshake. A park and
What do you mean? It was in 2018.
It was in Uhuru's second term.
Anyway, leave alone the local politics. The chairmanship is up for bids for AU, and originally, who would have been a better, if it was not for Raila, if it's not Raila, who would have been a better pick? I mean, in Kenya, who would have been a better pick?
And now, let's not say a better pick,
Okay.
but an alternative.
Let me say,
a viable alternative.
Sawa.
Uhuru Kenyatta. He is quite the diplomat. He has friends across. Think about it. Think about it.
Let me say.
You remember in Too Early for Birds when they used to, they'd say, think about it.
Yeah. Let me think about it. But I can see that because Uhuru has played peacekeeper role in many African countries.
And in fact, the peacekeeping role is recent. You remember, let me remind you of something that happened. During COVID, there was a huge controversy, and this plays to the neocolonialism angle, where Western powers, or the global North, for want of a better phrase, had really looked out for their interests. And they were even predicting doom for Africa. And people might not remember this, but Uhuru Kenyatta really played a key Pan-African role. He took up leadership and he really went in on the Western powers, called them out several times, not once, not twice. And in terms of walking the talk, locally, he made those vaccines free. Remember, we were not paying for them. So, and even in terms of, you can even find clips separate from that, where he's openly spoken out against the West in terms of policy, like he will not be influenced on certain policy decisions. And you could see how strong he went in terms of leaning east. So that's where I'm coming from in seeing this Pan-African role. And the fact that even internationally, he does really pull some diplomatic weight.
Just for fun, guys. You know that me, I'm a fan of Kibaki.
I'm being objective.
A fan of Uhuru Muigai Kenyatta. He's seated right next to me.
But it's the truth.
It's the truth. I mean, even me being a fan of Kibaki is that he was a great president. I feel like he was a stopgap measure before now we got to the point where we have the current
Gen Z crisis.
No, regime. The crisis
I was trying
scheme.
to pull you away from that conclusion.
Yes, actually, Uhuru would have, and he would have made a good
And that's not
candidate.
to say he would have been a better one. It's a viable alternative. Yes. So, other than in Kenya,
do you think Uhuru would have had those ambitions? Ama is happy in retirement.
But he's not in retirement. Because you mentioned peacekeeping role. He's working hard, trying to
that's
foster
what I'm asking.
peace.
Do you think that he may have had ambitions to be the AU chairman?
I don't know.
You don't know?
I don't know. But it wouldn't surprise me.
That if he did, because I mean, if he's doing so well as what is the official title?
Is it special envoy? I'm not sure. But you see, one thing you talked about the Odinga name, and you quoted Jaramogi, doyen of Kenyan politics, and went back to the 1960s. Remember that also Jomo Kenyatta played quite a significant role at the time in terms of Pan-Africanism, together with the Kwame Nkrumahs. So you may also actually be seeing...
Chaka.
It's true, actually.
No.
He wasn't?
Rather, I don't feel like he played a significant role.
Jomo Kenyatta?
Yeah.
He did. Actually, he did. He was very revered on the continent. Most people may not know. Not
as much as Tom Mboya. Tom Mboya and Jaramogi were the Pan-Africans, as far as what I have read and what I recall. I don't recall I feel like Jomo Kenyatta actually snubbed, or rather from what I read, snubbed a lot of African states and would actually align with Western powers compared to the Kwames, the Tom Mboya, Okay, no, not Tomboya, the Kwames.
Why did you take back
I
Tomboya?
take back Tomboya. You guys have to watch Too Early for Birds to understand why I've taken back Tomboya. But
it will surprise you how actually Jomo Kenyatta was revered on the African continent.
Really?
Yeah, and sometimes our view of him locally may cloud, whether rightly or wrongly, he was revered. And the point I was making is, Jaramogi and now his son Raila running for the AU chair, Jomo Kenyatta and then Uhuru being a viable alternative, is a case of dreams from my father. And I see these gentlemen still having that Pan-African leaning. Because, and you remember, these two gentlemen, both Raila and Uhuru, who were the, let me say, the mascots for the BBI. And I put it that way for legal reasons. They were the mascots for the BBI. They, in that BBI document,
they were the mascots.
They were the mascots for the BBI.
Cheerleaders.
The cheerleaders.
Not the initiators.
Moving on swiftly.
The Supreme Court.
We'll lose the point. So this BBI document was actually advancing and enhancing the march towards an East African federation. That's on the one hand. So you can see
where
that
they
sense
come
of
together.
unity.
Yeah.
Then also for Baba, one of his key policies is ensuring alignment with the African Continental Free Trade Area.
Yeah.
So you also see, you can actually see those
Pan-African dreams.
Yeah, the Pan-African dreams still being quite strong.
Okay, I wish Baba the best.
The question is, again, I say, because we've highlighted the games that are being played, we can't be so certain
that he can win.
He will win. What happens if he doesn't? What does it mean for our local politics? How will the government respond? Have they considered that possibility?
Have they? I wouldn't know if they have, but what happens is that Raila just comes back home. And then there'll be a homecoming. Baba, while you are away. Hashtag.
It's something interesting you said earlier about something being cooked and removing him from the local scene. Though it's not that easy, and you saw that even with the recent intervention when he gave us cabinet secretaries.
He gifted.
But considering this is something that started last year, and for the last half of the year, it was prominent. This year, it's been all about him running. As regards him, it's been about him running for the AU. And this goes all the way into the elections in February. What it may also have achieved is that it gave a year and a half, maybe 2 years of the regime to be able to maneuver. How well they've maneuvered is another question.
I feel like that deserves a whole episode.
Yes, which is why I'm saying that there's a possibility of whether or not he wins, there's a third force that people must keep an eye out for.
For sure. And I hope that third force is our saving grace. Because we talked about voter apathy and the current quietness and calmness, and that's not what we want for our country. We want people to dream and hope further. You see, we're talking about the Pan-African dream. We seem that after the Gen Z protest, there's a sort of like disquiet, and I remember actually just by scanning social media, you can really try and get the sentiment. I remember when the broad-based government was announced, and the first stop for your favorite politician was in Mombasa, and the scenes were electric.
The rapturous welcome.
You know that welcome.
Very organic.
Had he very organic, very organic. And just the way people were so disheartened that, man, we were about to get it, whatever it was. We don't want to get to a point where in the next coming election, that people are apathetic. That's why I'm saying I hope the third force will reinvigorate Kenyans to be more engaged in our political processes, to be more alert to certain hoodwinks that are given by the political class. That way we can hold them accountable, because anyone with power without accountability is disastrous. It's disastrous for them, it's disastrous for us, and we want to have a country. We really do want to have a country at the end of all this. Yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, that was our parting shot. Join us next time.
We, imesha hivyo.